My name is Darcy Holdorf. I'm the Programs Director here at the John C. Campbell Folk School. So we formally started working with the African American Craft Initiative in March of 2023 when we received a grant from AmeriCorps and the Folk Education Association, which partnered us in a participatory action research project where we started asking questions about how we could have better representation of African American craft, music, and dance artists at folk and craft schools. The conversation started through the Folk Education Association of America, and so Don Jackman Murphy, who is the vice president of that organization, does a lot of work in social justice and has a lot of connections, and including a relationship with Dr. Diana Baird Njai from the African American Craft Initiative, and she's really the one who brought the folk school into the conversation with the African American Craft Initiative to sort of say, like, hey, what could we do, and what are your ideas, and how would you want to work together?
My name is Diana Baird Njai, and I'm a interdisciplinary textile artist, and I just rewired. I retired from 34 years as a curator of folk life at the Smithsonian Center for Folk Life and Cultural Heritage. I actually, being an artist, preceded that, and what I like to think is that I'm now still doing a little bit of curating, but my major involvement is as an artist and hopefully as an advocate for the craft arts in general and for African American artists who work in craft medium. I was going to retire, and the Smithsonian said, well, we're going to have to sunset the project because, you know, you're not there. And the Folk School Alliance and Dawn Murphy, who was at the Folk School Alliance, said, well, you know, would we have some funding from AmeriCorps, and we're doing a participatory research project. Would you be interested in partnering with John C. Campbell Folk School to do a project of participatory research with African American craft artists and see if, you know, we can not only achieve some of the goals of the initiative, but also some of the goals of John C. Campbell to diversify and to widen the connections. Well, what's happening this year, which was having people come up to do artist residencies. And so we've had the pleasure of having two art colleagues, so Julie Dickerson Thompson and Camila Bryce Laporte, who are also on our planning committee, to come up and to discover the school. And from all I've heard from them, it's been a great experience. And I've had a great experience too, because I've been able to be an artist in residence. And in addition to making good stuff, we've also made a lot of new friends and been able to talk about the project with people on the staff and people who are coming up here as students.
My name is Julie Dickerson Thompson, and I am an artist. I do fine art, illustration, doll making, and saw sculpture, and a whole bunch of other painting and experiential adventures, I guess. The work that I do is trying to fight with art, trying to use weapons of creation, which would be instruments, musical, paintbrushes, dance, whatever, film, to make a better world and to fight against injustice and to make sure those stories get told so people can care.
My name is Camila Bryce Laporte. I am a folk life specialist, a community scholar, and a doll maker. But mostly I'm a mom and a grandma. Yeah. I entered this world of Black doll makers. Didn't know it existed, but there were other people who shared my sensibilities about the world and about telling our story through the arts. Folk arts is different than fine arts. It's a little more forgiving, more experimental.
what I said, how I dressed, how I presented was not unusual for them. So I realized this is a world that I fit in. The American Folk Life Society, of which I was a part, was having a meeting in Baltimore, and I asked them if I could bring the doll makers, and it went over very well. And then I really started thinking about who were these doll makers and what about this tradition. I'm coming at it also from a scholarly perspective and started to put it in context. Still practiced by African and their descendants. Other groups practice it too, but I'm looking specifically at this group, and that it's not the manufactured dolls. I'm talking about the handmade dolls, and the messaging that we think is contemporary has always been there. There have been stories about who we were, what our ambitions were, what was going on in our lives. It's in the dolls.
This is a greater conversation that a lot of folk and craft schools are having right now, which is that, we are historically white institutions and have not had a great representation of both Indigenous and African American craft, music, and dance traditions. It's important because first we want to tell an accurate narrative. So there's a lot of history there that really we don't know yet. And so we need to discover, unearth, and share a lot of that history. In the Appalachian region, a lot of our music and our craft traditions come from African American culture, and that's not really widely shared or known about. And so we think it's important to recognize and share that. Also, it just enriches the student experience. I mean, there are so many wonderful African American craft traditions that students are really curious to learn about, broadening their perspective, enriching their learning experience. One of the things that I have learned just working with Diana is about the African American craft aesthetic and just how unique and different that is, and how often maybe undervalued or little understood it might be, although it is quite sophisticated and can be very powerful. But for a historically white institution, it might take some education to help us understand that aesthetic better. So I've learned a lot from her on that front too.
There were very rarely people of color at the craft schools. One of the aims for the project was to work to see whether we could get much more, not interest, because the interest was there, but much more availability, much more chances for people to be at the craft school, to teach, to learn, to commune. And so these are some of the things that we talked about for the African American Craft Initiative.
This place just feels like it is just bringing all the good up to the surface instead of all the bad. Not bearing the bad, but healing, helping, opening.
The folk school tradition's been around for a very long time, and yet very few people out of a very specific core of a specific demographic really take advantage of it. And what we want is to open it up. On our end, we want people to have the experience of coming to some place like this and spending a week developing your art. But what's even more important for me, what's been wonderful, is we're often thinking, because the artists that I work with, we were all born into the civil rights movement. We came of age at that time, and as it turns out, many of our parents were engaged in pushing for equal rights and in some form, right? And we were beneficiaries of that. So we're operating under this, that using art for activism is what we do naturally. What was interesting about coming here is finding people, my cohorts, my contemporaries who are white, living in Appalachia, doing the same thing. It was amazing. The other thing is to run into people who are really about, if not trying to change things, to grow themselves.
The folk school tradition puts community first, and then right after that, craft. So craft becomes a tool for building community. And I think that is something that is part of, the mission that I've read, for John C. Campbell, but it's also, you see it happening here. And I mean, I've learned a lot about things to do in terms of building my competence as a maker, but I've also gotten so much more in terms of my competence as a person and ability to learn from others. And I think that that's a really, really important thing, especially again, right now.
We see these as really lasting relationships that we hope will have multiple touch points throughout the years, and over time we'll just build deeper relationships, have a lot more instructors from those cultures, and just a much more broad representation of Appalachian craft culture music.